Believe it or not, the dashing Clark Gable had breath so foul his co-stars dreaded kissing him, while the goddess Marilyn Monroe reportedly went days without bathing, letting dirty dishes pile up in her bed. These are not just whispers. They are the documented, grimy, and often shocking truths about the personal habits of Hollywood's greatest legends, and we're about to expose them all. Number 1. Clark Gable, the king of halitosis. We begin with the man they called the King of Hollywood, the impossibly handsome Clark Gable. For decades, he was the absolute standard of masculine charm, a rugged yet sophisticated hero in films like It Happened One Night and Mutiny on the Bounty. His confident smirk and powerful presence made him one of the most bankable stars in the world. Women adored him, and men wanted to be him, cementing his status as a cinematic royalty. But getting close to the king was a shockingly unpleasant experience that few dared to speak about publicly. Behind that million-dollar smile was a case of halitosis so powerful it became the stuff of Hollywood legend. Breath wasn't just bad. It was an olfactory assault that could reportedly be detected from several feet away. This wasn't a one-time issue, but a chronic condition that plagued him for most of his adult life. The primary culprit behind Gable's problem was his catastrophic dental health, a result of aggressive pyorrhea, or gum disease. The condition was so severe that by the age of 32, he was forced to have a full dental extraction and be fitted for a complete set of dentures. Unfortunately, in that era, dentures were difficult to clean and often trapped food particles, which, combined with his chain-smoking and drinking habits, created a perfect storm for unimaginably bad breath. The most famous victim of Gable's condition was his Gone with the Wind co-star, Vivien Leigh. She was reportedly horrified by the prospect of the romantic scenes, later complaining that kissing him was an awful and stomach-turning ordeal. Think about that. The most iconic and sweeping romance in film history was, for its leading lady, a moment she had to professionally endure. The king of Hollywood's biggest secret was that he desperately needed a mint. Number 2. Marilyn Monroe, the unkempt bombshell. No star has ever embodied glamour and sensuality quite like Marilyn Monroe. She was more than a movie star. She was a cultural phenomenon, a luminous bombshell whose image suggested ultimate purity and perfection. On screen and in photos, she was meticulously crafted to be every man's dream and every woman's envy. This carefully constructed facade, however, hid a private life of profound chaos and personal neglect that would shock her legions of fans. Marilyn's struggles with her mental health often manifested in bizarre and messy habits, particularly her eating. She was known to eat meals in her bed, indulging in steaks, crackers, and rich foods, only to leave the dirty plates and leftovers under the covers or on the nightstand for days. Housekeepers and friends reported finding molding food and swarms of ants in the bedroom of the world's biggest star, a grim sign of her inner turmoil. Even more shocking were the reports from those in her inner circle about her aversion to bathing. While she could clean up beautifully for the camera, in her private life she would allegedly go for days at a time without stepping into a bath or shower. Her one-time roommate, the actress Shelley Winters, confirmed these stories, expressing astonishment that the goddess of glamour had such a casual approach to personal hygiene when not in the public eye. It's crucial to understand that the behavior was not simple laziness, but a tragic symptom of her deep, lifelong battle with severe depression, anxiety, and debilitating endometriosis. The immense pressure to be Marilyn Monroe was so crushing that when she was away from the cameras, she lacked the energy or will to perform basic self-care. Her unkempt private life was a heartbreaking reflection of the pain she hid from the world. Number 3. Marlon Brando, the primal rebel. Marlon Brando was a force of nature who completely changed the art of acting in Hollywood. He tore down the old-fashioned, theatrical style and replaced it with a raw, primal, and mumbling realism that was utterly captivating. He was the original rebel, the brooding anti-hero in a leather jacket who didn't play by the rules. His on-screen persona was one of a raw, untamed energy. As it turns out, that untamed energy was 100% authentic. Brando's rebellion against Hollywood's superficial standards extended to a complete and total disregard for personal grooming. He was notoriously unkempt, often foregoing showers for days on end and wearing clothes until they were nearly unwearable. He saw the polished look of his peers as a symbol of the phoniness he so despised. This lifestyle choice did not go unnoticed by his colleagues. Numerous co-stars, directors, and crew members have commented over the years that Brando carried a distinctive and often powerful aroma with him on set. It was a musky combination of sweat and indifference that became part of his off-screen legend. He simply did not care what anyone thought of how he looked or smelled. For Marlon Brando, this wasn't mere sloppiness. It was a conscious act of defiance. Every unwashed shirt and unshowered day was a statement against the sanitized, plastic perfection that the Hollywood machine demanded of its stars. He was an artist, not a commodity, and he made sure everyone around him knew it, even if they had to hold their breath to do so. Number 4. Judy Garland, the tragic star. Judy Garland sang her way into the world's heart as Dorothy Gale in The Wizard of Oz. With her girl-next-door charm and a voice that could convey both incredible power and heartbreaking vulnerability, she became America's sweetheart. For millions, she was a symbol of hope and innocence, a cherished icon of a more optimistic time. The studio, MGM, worked tirelessly to maintain this pristine public image, but the magic of Oz concealed a horrifying reality. To control her weight and keep her working exhaustive hours, the studio executives had put a teenage Judy on a destructive regimen of amphetamines for energy and barbiturates for sleep. This state-sanctioned addiction would spiral out of control and haunt her for the rest of her life. The rainbow was built on a foundation of chemical dependency. This lifelong battle with addiction took a devastating physical and mental toll. The drugs caused a cascade of health problems, including profuse sweating, erratic mood swings, and severe weight fluctuations. In the throes of her illness, basic self-care like grooming and hygiene became an impossible task, a low priority in a life consumed by a desperate struggle for survival. The disheveled appearance that marked Judy Garland's later years was not a choice. It was a visible symptom of her immense pain. Her unkempt state was a physical manifestation of the damage inflicted upon her by the studio system and her subsequent addictions. It was a tragic, public cry for help from a woman whose sparkle was systematically extinguished by the very industry that made her a star. Number 5. Humphrey Bogart, the gritty icon. There has never been anyone cooler than Humphrey Bogart. Draped in a trench coat with a cigarette permanently dangling from his lip, he was the embodiment of world-weary cynicism and hard-boiled charm. As Rick in Casablanca or Sam Spade in The Maltese Falcon, he wasn't a hero in a shining white hat. He was a complex, gritty man living in a morally gray world. Bogart's iconic persona was not an act. It was fueled by a real-life, prodigious consumption of cigarettes and alcohol. He was a legendary chain smoker, often getting through multiple packs a day, and he was rarely seen without a glass of scotch in his hand. This intense lifestyle created a permanent personal atmosphere, an aura of stale tobacco, liquor, and coffee that followed him everywhere. Unsurprisingly, this combination wreaked havoc on his oral hygiene. Insiders and co-stars spoke of the infamous Bogart breath, a powerful odor that was the price of admission for getting close to the star. His teeth were famously stained a yellowish-brown from a lifetime of smoking, a detail that only added to his gritty, unpolished authenticity on screen. He looked and smelled exactly like the characters he played. And for Bogart, that was entirely the point. He wasn't interested in the manufactured glamour of his Hollywood contemporaries. He was interested in a rugged, lived-in reality. His stained teeth and smoky aroma were not flaws to be corrected, but essential components of his persona. In a town full of fakes, Humphrey Bogart's grimy authenticity was his greatest asset. Number 6. Bette Davis, the unfiltered queen. Bette Davis was not a star who charmed her way to the top. She fought her way there with sheer, unadulterated talent. She was a force of nature, a formidable actress who was unafraid to play unlikable, complex, and powerful woman. She was known for her intensity, her commanding presence, and of course, those unforgettable, expressive eyes that could convey more than a page of dialogue. But while audiences were captivated by her on-screen fire, Hollywood crews and insiders were often preoccupied by something else entirely. For years, a persistent and widespread rumor circulated that the great Bette Davis had a significant problem with body odor. It was one of the industry's most whispered about open secrets, a shocking detail about one of its most revered queens. The cause remains a subject of speculation. Perhaps it was a simple disregard for the tedious conventions of femininity, a byproduct of her constant chain-smoking, or simply the physical result of the immense stress and energy she poured into her volcanic performances. Whatever the reason, Davis was apparently unconcerned with adhering to the perfume standards expected of a leading lady. The greatest irony of this rumor lies in her legendary feud with John Crawford. Crawford was a known sufferer of obsessive-compulsive disorder, with a pathological fixation on cleanliness, famously covering her furniture in plastic and scrubbing her hands raw. One can only imagine the sheer horror and secret delight Crawford must have felt knowing that her arch-nemesis, the great Betty Davis, allegedly smelled less than rosy. Number 7. Tallulah Bankhead, the Wild Child. If Hollywood had an official court jester and resident wild child, it was Tallulah Bankhead. Famous for her deep, husky voice, her scandalous wit, and her utterly unapologetic hedonism, she lived life at full volume. She collected scandals like other women collected jewelry, delighting in shocking the puritanical sensibilities of her era. She was a hurricane of a woman in a town built on polite facades. Tallulah's rebellion against convention extended to every facet of her life, including what she considered the boring chore of personal hygiene. She was famously and proudly adverse to bathing, allegedly going for days or even a week at a time without washing. She saw cleanliness as a tedious conformity, and she was a proud nonconformist living in a chaotic bohemian lifestyle. This habit became the stuff of legend during the filming of Alfred Hitchcock's 1944 film Lifeboat. The entire movie was shot in the cramped, confined space of a single boat in a water tank. Bankhead's refusal to bathe in the hot studio lights reportedly made the experience a trial of endurance for her unfortunate castmates and the famously fastidious director. To dismiss Tallulah as merely dirty is to miss the point entirely. Her lack of hygiene, like her profanity and her open sexuality, was a form of radical self-expression. It was a deliberate statement that she would not be tamed, packaged, or sanitized for public consumption. She was Tallulah Bankhead, after all, and she would live and smell exactly as she pleased, darling. Number 8. Gary Cooper, the strong, silent, and sweaty type. On screen, Gary Cooper was the quiet, dignified hero of the American West and the Heartland. With his lanky frame and understated charisma, he embodied integrity, humility, and a kind of clean cut, all-American masculinity in films like High Noon and Sergeant York. He was the strong, silent type that audiences trusted and admired, a pillar of on-screen decency. Once the camera stopped rolling, however, that clean-cut image often vanished. Off-screen, Cooper was famously indifferent to the primping and grooming that consumed his Hollywood peers. He was, at heart, a man of the outdoors, a rancher and sportsman who couldn't be bothered with the fussy, superficial demands of stardom. He preferred the grit of real life to the polish of the studio. This indifference frequently manifested as a noticeable lack of personal hygiene. Several of his co-stars, ironically including our brutally honest Tallulah Bankhead, made no secret of their displeasure, complaining that Cooper often arrived on set smelling as if he'd spent the weekend hunting and hadn't yet found a shower. His natural state was, to put it politely, rustic. Ultimately, Gary Cooper's habits were less about rebellion and more about a complete lack of concern. He was a man who didn't sweat the small stuff. You could put a rugged outdoorsman like him, cameras, daily bathing, but you couldn't scrub the ranch of his fundamental character. Number 9. Ava Gardner, the Barefoot Contessa. MGM famously billed Ava Gardner as the world's most beautiful animal, and the description was perfect. She possessed a sultry, earthy beauty and a fiery, untamable spirit that captivated audiences and broke hearts in equal measure. She was stunningly gorgeous, but there was always something wild and dangerous just beneath the surface, a quality that made her utterly irresistible. Her most iconic role was in The Barefoot Contessa, a title that became her permanent nickname because it perfectly captured her essence. Ava genuinely hated wearing shoes and loathed the pretension and stuffiness of Hollywood society. She was most at home with her feet in the dirt, a glass of gin in one hand and a cigarette in the other, cursing like a sailor. This celebrated earthiness was an authentic part of her entire being, including her approach to personal hygiene. While always presented beautifully on screen, in her private life she was said to be rustic. Some biographers claim she preferred her natural, musky scent to perfumes, and was far more concerned with living life to the fullest than with constant primping and washing, a fact compounded by her heavy drinking and smoking. This created a legendary clash of lifestyles with her most famous husband, Frank Sinatra. Old Blue Eyes was a notorious obsessive about cleanliness, a man who reportedly showered multiple times a day and demanded impeccable hygiene from everyone around him. The tempestuous marriage between the pristine crooner and the earthy goddess was a constant battle between lavender soap and raw, unfiltered life. Number 10. Lupe Velez, the Mexican Spitfire. Our final star is the human firecracker known as Lupe Velez. Billed as the Mexican Spitfire, she was a whirlwind of comedic talent, fiery passion, and boundless energy. On and off screen, she was known for her explosive temper, her hilarious antics, and a personality so uninhibited that it regularly sent studio publicists into a panic. She was a true original. Lupe Velez lived her life completely unfiltered, gleefully breaking every social rule she encountered. Her behavior was famously wild and unpredictable, and according to Hollywood lore, this absolute lack of inhibition applied to all areas of her life. She saw social niceties and conventions as boring restrictions made to be smashed to pieces, and she did so with gusto. According to the legends that swirled around her, Velez was utterly unconcerned with the tedious demands of personal grooming, seeing it as just another stuffy convention. Rumors persisted for years that she disliked wearing underwear and that her general approach to hygiene was as casual and chaotic as the rest of her life. It was all part of the untamable Spitfire brand she had so successfully cultivated. From her acting career to her love life to her personal habits, Lupe Velez's entire identity was built on being the opposite of the pristine, manufactured Hollywood starlet. Her rumored lack of concern for hygiene was just one more aspect of her lifelong defiance against the system that tried, and failed, to tame her. She lived a life that was messy, vibrant, and unapologetically her own, right up to her tragic and controversial end. So, the dazzling images that flickered on the silver screen were indeed an illusion. Behind the perfect smiles were aching, rotting teeth. Beneath the couture gowns was skin that hadn't seen soap and water in days. The immortal icons we placed on pedestals were, in the end, profoundly, fascinatingly, and sometimes disgustingly human. Their glamour was a testament to the power of lighting, makeup, and brilliant publicity. It's fair to remember that they lived in a different time, an era before a daily shower was a universal expectation and when dental care was far more primitive. But the stories also reveal so much more about the stars themselves. We see their habits as acts of rebellion against a repressive studio system, or as the tragic external signs of their deep internal battles with addiction and mental health. Discovering these grimy secrets doesn't need to tarnish the legacy of their incredible talent. On the contrary, it should make these legends feel more real and relatable to us. It shatters the impossible myth of perfection and replaces it with the messy, complicated, and flawed truth of the human condition. They were not gods after all. They were just extraordinarily talented people who created immortal art despite their mortal failings. But these are just 10 of the most well-documented stories from Hollywood's golden age. We know there are more secrets buried in the studio archives. What other classic Hollywood tales have you heard? Which star's dirty laundry did we fail to air out? Let us know in the comments below. We promise to read every single one. If you were as shocked as we were by the grime beneath the glamour, do us a favor and hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the hidden history of Hollywood. Thank you for watching, and until the next video, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.